A little bit about Metricts so you understand where this data is coming through in the kind of a lens that I'm adding to the trend remit of the panel. Metricts kind of tracks what consumers are doing on their handsets, understanding how handsets impact what consumers are doing, and try to project both the development of the technology and consumer needs kind of forward a little bit, right? So definitely the lens I will be taking to this is kind of looking at the role that mobile is playing in kind of broader trends that are impacting media consumption and the digitization of media. In many cases, the cell phone will just be kind of a logical extension of a trend. In some cases, it'll be something that's actually accelerating a trend. And in some ways, it'll be something that is particularly unique within that trend. So getting to the first trend. Yes, there is still only 24 hours in a day. I was an internet analyst back in the day, and from 1996 to 2002, I probably said this 3 times a day. Right? I was at a meeting the other day with some people in market research who were trying to convince me that if you actually added up everything people do in a day, we've actually made the day last 38 hours. That's one point of view. My own point of view is that there's still actually only 24 hours, no matter how much you multitask. And as it relates to a programming and an advertising standpoint, we're all fighting for consumer mindshare in an increasingly fragmented environment. You know, mass marketing as a way of communicating with consumers is clearly dead. As marketers and as programmers, we really need to understand kind of multimodal consumption, how people are consuming things in bits and bobs across many platforms. This notion of 360-degree campaigns, integrated advertising and marketing becoming the norm. This has gigantic implications for, again, people in the business of making content and selling advertisers or audiences. This is also, unfortunately, tied to a general decrease in the impact of advertising overall. Over-messaging is endemic. There are many great stats here. The one I love is the average consumer today will receive more messages in this 24 hours than someone did in an entire year 50 years ago. So, you know, that's pretty exponential growth there. And again, the challenge of it is like that old Borscht Belt joke, you know, lots of portions and the food is really bad too, right? Doesn't taste good. Because there's such over-messaging, people and advertisers need to really fight to kind of raise above the clutter that's out there. And we're also entering, and I think we alluded to this a little bit, this kind of era of consumer control, where more savvy consumers are demanding fair exchange for value. Well, if I'm going to look at your ads, or if I'm going to look at your video on my phone or on a device, or move my video or my content around, you know, I need to be receive some remuneration for that. This is a trend particular to mobile. Obviously, there are a decent amount of cell phones out in the U.S. and the European markets, depending on how you look at it, upwards of 70 to kind of 80% penetration in the U.S. We still have room to grow. We'll reach that kind of indoor plumbing or indoor TV level of ubiquity in the next couple of years. And outside of the U.S., we'll be adding a significant amount of devices. To my mind, this is just a trend as it relates towards there's more gadgets that consumers will be using that's going to divide and fragment the way that they consume media. This is kind of our opinion in Metricts, and we'll probably have some healthy debate about this on the panel, but we do believe that the phone is kind of a unique device being introduced into this kind of landscape of the way consumers interact with media. It's unique in a couple of ways. Number one, it is convergent in a way that we haven't seen before. So it combines work and personal. It combines internet and wireless. It combines email across multiple devices. It allows you to connect with your media wherever you are and move that across different platforms potentially. So it is particularly unique in that way, and as the devices evolve, so will the functionality. It's digital, which is really important as it relates to not just content, but advertising and marketing, right? Very accountable, highly measurable platform. It allows a massive degree of targeting if we figure it out, from everything from location to contextual targeting. And it's kind of one of these uniquely personal devices, right? I see there's probably a decent amount of people using their PC right now as I'm talking, and that's okay. There's also a decent amount of people using their cell phones. I would submit that the cell phone is a uniquely personal device that people have a particular relationship with, and that's going to really impact the way that they use that device for content. The net of this is just a simple way of saying is we're moving from an era where the killer, I love this photo, only 20 years old actually. We're moving from an era where the killer application was voice, and if you talk to networks, they'll tell you that's a killer application, to one where we're really looking at the phone as kind of this link, right, between all the different places you communicate and store and manage your media. The kind of fourth trend here, and this is again very specific to mobile, is this notion of, much as in the internet we move from this very basic type of, you know, I'm sending emails, I'm being productive, I'm kind of moving around internet 1.0, to an internet 2.0 that was more kind of distributed, more viral, a lot more user-generated, more complicated. In mobile, we're beginning to see a shift to this kind of more mobile 2.0 type behavior. And I want to talk about that a little bit. What does that mean? Well, it means that in regard to people who actually use their cell phone to interact with content other than voice, we're number one, reaching pretty ubiquitous levels of cell phone usage. Consumers who actually use their devices to interact, for example, on the mobile web, do so pretty often on a regular basis. 56% of those who do use it turn to news and information on a daily and weekly basis. The devices are getting more sophisticated. Need to talk about that a little bit. And business models are proliferating as well as experimentation. Just quickly, if you think about what people are doing on their cell phones today, in terms of content browsing, it's very similar to what they do on the internet. Top categories: news, information, weather, et cetera, et cetera. Speed to this slide. Consumption is kind of evolving, and again, moving from this kind of Web 1.0 to this Web 2.0, Mobile 1.0, Mobile 2.0 type of behavior. We're seeing an increase in a lot of activities that have to do with rich media, looking at media, moving media around, creating media through building my own ringtones, getting news and information from downloadable applications versus what's kind of installed on my devices. Slight decrease in applications have been available for a while, such as games and buying ringtones. Excuse me, I'm choking on my own knowledge up here. In terms of what's happening here, I would submit that we're seeing a little bit of a paradigm shift in terms of this new generation activities that's much more indicative of what we'll see going forward and therefore has a lot of impact in digital media consumption. We're seeing a general increase in news, but news is getting distributed. It's being read through SMS and through downloaded applications, not just browsers. Viral. 1 in 10 mobile subscribers creates and shares content today on their cell phone. That's a lot of people because there are 215 million mobile phone users in this country. Some of the highest growing categories of consumption involves exactly this user-generated content, sharing pictures, updating your Facebook page with new photos, videos that you've just shot. Again, this is also disrupting traditional business models. I think you can directly attribute the decrease in the sales of kind of professionally made ringtones from media companies, music companies primarily, right, with the fact that it's getting easier and easier for users to make their own ringtones, so why should they buy them? Also with music, we're beginning to see a closer interrelationship between the cell phone and the PC, and this is critical, where the most preferred way of getting music on this device is sideloading, is to connect the device to a PC versus buying directly from Nokia or any of these other guys who are selling music online. Mobile video is nascent but growing, from 2.6% in January to 3.9% in September 07. About 8.2 million people used or viewed mobile video on their phones as of September. That's a small number related to the overall mobile universe, but again, growing, and 7.1 million were actually watching videos that were created by friends that sent them to them. So again, moving to this more complicated type of usage here. And the other thing that's happening is the main thing that's driving new cell phones into the market, the main features consumers are looking for are cameras and music, right? Those are the features that are driving devices, and that actually has an obvious direct implication in usage of digital media. And then maybe just to summarize, I'm kind of sneaking 4 points in here, but hopefully I have enough time to do that. This notion of kind of what is holding us back is driving us forward. A couple of things that I think have broader implications to overall usage of digital media and how that's impacting consumers. Pricing, right? The reality is that consumers are getting nickeled and dimed to death everywhere. The average cost of a cell phone bill has increased about 20% in the past year or so. If I was a carrier, I'd say there's good reasons for that. If I was a consumer, I would say everything costs me more money. When am I going to get some of my money back? When am I going to have access subsidized on my phone? When am I going to see some more rewards for watching all these ads that are constantly thrown at me? They're at that kind of tipping point where that's going to become a big part of the conversation that we're having on the cell phone is what's the consumer incentive to actually participate in that as an advertising and content distribution channel. Three other trends that you need to be aware of that are going to vastly impact the cell phone, and maybe I'll just actually go to these slides very quickly. Number one, most people who use cell phones access content at relatively slow to incredibly painful speeds. It's almost 28.8 baud or 14.4 baud modem time, or less even. However, for people who are on 3G networks, use these speedier networks on their phone, their content usage increases almost exponentially. About 19% of the people in this country are on that type of throughput right now. That number is going to grow very aggressively in the next couple of years. It's going to have a tremendous impact in content usage on cell phones. The other thing is the type of phone matters hugely. Smartphones, like the iPhone I have up here, Treos and BlackBerries I see in the audience, also produces exponential lifts and increase in the amount of activities people do. People are 4 times more likely to browse news and information, 3 times as likely to actually watch videos on their phone. And again, these numbers are small now, but they are growing quite large. And finally, this notion of subsidization. what is the role that advertising and marketing is going to play in the cell phone? Obviously, in TV, as audience become fragmented, we spend a lot of time thinking about how we justify that value proposition to advertisers. You know, how are we going to convince them that that's the best place to reach consumers and that's the best price point? I do think as we begin to figure out the mobile advertising model and as mobile becomes part of typically these more integrated marketing campaigns, we'll be spending a lot of time over the next 2 years figuring out advertising and marketing. And I think in this particular case, the consumer is going to have a lot to say about how that relationship is going to evolve.